Here we go. Well, welcome. Every year I'm asked by the local chamber to do a Thanksgiving address, and this year, because life is a bit complicated because of COVID, we're doing this in a virtual way, I guess we're calling that, and I don't like it, but that's the way it is. I'd like to get started. I remember a speech by Ken Blanchard a few years ago in which Ken Blanchard, along with Dr. Smith, wrote some amazing little books some years ago. One was entitled Who Moved My Cheese? Another was entitled The 1 Minute Manager. And I had the privilege of hearing Ken Blanchard at a large convention one year, and he opened up, and I figured out right off the bat he was a Christian. 3 ways to start your day. So during this Thanksgiving time of year, I'm going to give you a couple or three nuggets to help you get the day off to a better start. It's by asking yourself 3 questions. Question number 1, what do I have of which I am proud? You know, your mind just races when you think about things like that, but certainly we have family members to be proud of, and accomplishments, and the fact that we're a part of such a great nation in the world. You can be proud to be a citizen of the United States of America. The second question is, what do I have for which I am thankful, which is the theme of my comments today. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you know, to count your blessings has a tremendously positive effect on the way we think. And the third question is, who do I love and who loves me? And that will really send your mind racing, especially if you have grandchildren. So I thought today to get us in a Thanksgiving kind of mood, I'd tell you 2 or 3 stories, family stories, because we all as families have stories. I wish you could have met my dad. He's one of the finest gentlemen I've ever known. As a matter of fact, I am one of those fortunate sons who can say that my father was the best man I've ever known. He was just a prince of a guy. And when he reached his 79th birthday, there were 2 things on the farm he was no longer able to do physically. One was to drive the tractor to pull the tobacco setter. He never taught his sons how to lay off straight rows. He did it himself, and he felt no one else could do it like him. And he always baled the hay. We were given other tasks on the farm, but not to pull the tobacco setter and not to bale the hay. Those were his 2 things. And when he could no longer do that, he just kind of gave up. In the last 2 years of his life, he was in the throes of Alzheimer's, and he said some of the funniest things. And during these times in which we live, stressful times, times of uncertainty, times when not only is technology separating us, but certainly the pandemic is separating us, I think it's important that we continue to laugh. And so my dad said funny things, and I tell persons who have a loved one who is experiencing Alzheimer's, when they say things that don't make sense, it doesn't work to argue with them. Sometimes I see people get in the face of someone who has Alzheimer's and say, "Do you know who I am?" And the person will always look confused, and so I always introduced myself to my dad. But I went to see him on a winter's day. It was a time when my dad stayed fully dressed all day long, slept fully dressed, kept his cap and coat on even during the day, wouldn't take his shoes off when he laid down to take a nap. And so I find myself on the front porch of my parents' home on a cold winter's day, and I knocked on the door. As a matter of fact, I rang the doorbell. We had installed a doorbell that would wake the dead. And because of my dad's hearing, my mother and dad made a great tag team for over 60 years. But toward the end of their lives, my dad was losing his hearing and my mother was legally blind. And so they tag teamed it. My dad would do the looking and my mother would do the listening. And on this day, I rang the doorbell knowing that my mother, the only one who could hear, would recognize that someone was at the door. And then I rang the doorbell a second time, and I could see my mother in the bedroom saying, "Someone's at the door." And so after a few moments, I see my dad circling the kitchen door and coming down the hall. His shadow was preceding him, and here he comes down the hall. He has his silver cane. He's looking around if he's never been here before, and finally he arrives at the front door and he sees me and he waves. And I said, "Dad, open the door." And he smiled and said, "Okay." And he reached and jiggled the doorknob, and then he looked perplexed and said, "It won't open." I knew the key was pinned to my mother's lapel to keep him in the house. And so I said, "Dad, go get a key from Ma." And he thought that was a good idea. He said, "Okay." So he turned and left me and was gone for about a half a day. And after a few minutes, what seemed like an hour, I see him coming again, and he turns the corner with his silver cane, and he arrives at the door, and he sees me again, and he waves. And I said, "Dad, open the door." He said, "Okay." He jiggled the doorknob and said, "It won't open." He had forgotten the key. And so I told him again, "Dad, go get a key from Ma." And he looked a little more confused, and he said, "Okay." And then he walked over to his favorite chair and slipped off his shoes and took off his cap and began to rock. I had been forgotten. But I didn't give up easily. I encircled the house to my mother's bedroom window where her bed was level with the door facing, and I pecked on the window, and she pulled back the curtain. I can see her now. And I told her my dilemma, and she said, wait a minute. And she began to try to slip the door key through the vapor vent in the storm window, which is not an easy task. And I almost gave up twice, but she kept saying, no, I got it. Finally, the key slips through the little vent, and I take the key, and I encircle the house, and I unlock the door, and I speak to my dad, and then I go back to talk to my mother, and we visited for a few minutes, and finally I asked her the burning question that was on my mind. I said, "Mother, what did Dad say when he came back to get the key?" She said, "Well, I asked him, 'Who's at the front door?' And he said, 'I don't know him, but he's been here before.'" Well, if you're listening to this message today, you may not know me, and I don't know who I'm talking to, but it's important that we continue to laugh. My wife, Kathy, for a short period of time, worked as the business manager at the local elementary school. Now, there's another name for the business manager at the local elementary school. They are referred to as the lunch lady. So Kathy was the lunch lady at the elementary school. Back during the days when our children were small, our boys, Kathy always had a job that would not allow her to leave work, and so I became the go-to parent at the elementary school, and I had kind of learned how things work out there. But it was intriguing for her to, especially working with kindergarten children, and she would come home after the first day or two and tell me stories of the kindergarten kids, and she would say, "Jack, these little kids don't even know their name." She said, when they're going through the lunch line and they come up to the computer where I'm typing in the information, I will ask their names, and some of them can't even talk, and they'll just stand there and they'll shake their heads. And so every day when Kathy came home from school, I would ask her how the kids were progressing, and she would laugh and say, "There are some of them who still don't know their names. They're so cute." And so weeks go by, and one day a teacher approaches me and says, "Well, did you hear what happened to Kathy today?" Kathy would never have told me this story. I said, "No, but tell me." She said, "Well, she was sitting there at the computer this morning at lunch taking down the information, and a little first grader walked up to her and patted her on the back and said, 'You're doing better this week.'" So I have to come to the conclusion that while we are watching other people, they are watching us. One of my favorite stories with our boys when they were growing up, teenagers, we bought a new lawnmower to make some extra money for the boys, and one day they were moving the mower across the county on a little 10-foot trailer. And back in those days when our boys were doing things, there were always another group of buddies running with them. They were like a group of puppies. And so on this particular day, someone was told to strap the lawnmower on the trailer, and there was a miscommunication. If you can imagine, They were going along the rural roads in Trousdale County with a lawnmower unattached on a flatbed trailer with no back gate. Now picture that. As they started up a long hill, my son Jay Brim said they hit a bump in the road, and as they started down the hill, he began to narrate. He said, "Dad, I looked through the rearview mirror and that sucker was passing me on the wrong side of the road." Well, he hit the brakes and the lawnmower passed him, crossed the road, entered a ravine, and did forward flips to the bottom of the hill. They didn't tell me for a week. But when I finally saw the mower, the gearbox in the back looked like someone had taken a sledgehammer and beat it to a pulp. Some of the funniest things that happen to us in everyday situations. It's important that we continue to laugh. That's why Andy of Mayberry and some of the great shows are coming back, because we just don't have enough to laugh about. But it's important we stop from time to time, not only to laugh, but to be thankful. Here's your homework. As a matter of fact, you can go to the Chamber website and get a copy of this. I'll have it printed for you. This is what it looks like right here. The exercise is to do this. And we are at least 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, so you've got some lead time. What I'm going to suggest is you take your sheet of paper. A legal pad works really well. And number down the left-hand column from 1 to 25, and sit down and carefully write down the 25 things for which you are most thankful. And here's the deal. Just let your mind free flow. Don't make this a tough task. Just as things come to your mind, begin to write them down. Then I'm going to suggest on the next day, do it again, and the third day, do it again. And what you'll find is your top 10 come right up on top of the page fairly quickly. I'll give you 2 or 3 of mine. Peace with God. I think that's the most important thing for which one can be thankful. Then I think about the fact that I am a citizen of the United States of America and enjoy personal freedom. Then I think of friends. If you're in good health, you can be thankful for that. I've had some great mentors in my life, and sometimes they come to my mind's eyes. I think about all the people who have crossed my path that helped me be a better person. Family. If you have grandchildren, you can write down the laughter of little girls and the mischievousness of little boys, those things that make your heart sing. I would suggest, if you really want to change the way you think, that you take this list and make a new one every day for 30 days. And let me tell you what will happen. Again, you will write down the top 10 pretty quickly, but as the days go by, you'll begin to look to things or for things to add to your list. And some of the most amazing things will pop into your head. But the reason it's transformative is you become more aware of what is going on around you. And you enjoy the smell of coffee and the birds singing at dawn. Little things that mean so much. Well, the Thanksgiving in the United States has been observed since the founding fathers, right up into the time of Abraham Lincoln. Modern Thanksgiving was proclaimed for all states in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln. He was influenced by Sarah Hale, who wrote letters to politicians for approximately 40 years, advocating an official holiday. Can you imagine that? For 40 years, she sent letters. Lincoln set the national Thanksgiving by proclamation for the final Thursday in November, explicitly to celebrate the continued success of the Union in the Civil War. On October 31st, 1939, President Franklin Roosevelt signed a presidential proclamation changing the holiday to the next to the last Thursday for business purposes, and then on December 26, 1941, he signed a joint resolution of Congress changing the National Thanksgiving Day to the 4th Thursday in November. We're only 2 weeks away. Personally, I think Thanksgiving is the second greatest holiday. Four things to help you get through the holiday season, through not only Thanksgiving, but on into the Christmas season. Four things that will make your life more meaningful. One is to stay in touch. As I mentioned earlier, the technologies and COVID-19 have certainly served to separate us from each other, and I don't like it. But it's important we spend time with each other as best we can. Zig Ziglar, the great motivational speaker who checked out everything that he presented, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, factually, told the story of how during the Russian Revolution, the Tsar of Russia took 200 infants from their mothers, infant babies, and placed them in an institution and gave instructions to the caregivers to feed these babies when they were hungry, to change them when they needed changing, but at no time allow the babies to come in contact with human skin. So the caregivers wore gloves, and occasionally if they had to hold the children, they did, but they never let them touch human skin. And at the end of 2 years, all the babies were dead. You see, we need meaningful contact with each other, not only to physically touch, but to make eye contact, or to be in the presence of one another, and sometimes we suffer from that. Technology has made that even more so. As we all know, we're always being directed to a website rather than talking to a real human being. So during these days leading up to Thanksgiving and Christmas, make it a point to spend time with other people. I call it selective association. Get in touch with people and spend time with them. Take them to lunch. Selective association. Be with people on purpose. Of course, there's some people that you want to avoid. I have a friend I was visiting with not too long ago, and we talked about not worrying. And he said, I've got a buddy that worries all the time. He said, one day we were talking, and he said, things have gone really well for the last 2 weeks, and that's what worries me. Well, negative people have a way of draining us, so make sure you spend time with people who lift you up and make you better just by being who they are and what they say. Another thing is to make sure you get some exercise. Hey, it's a great time. You don't have anything else to do. You can't be with people, so get out. I've noticed on the walking track, the local walking track here in town, that you don't have to worry about social distancing from 8 to midnight. You're out there all by yourself. My mother, who lived to be 89 and needed both knees replaced, but she was too bow-legged, she spent lots of time sitting on a stool, swinging her bad knee just to keep it going. And one of her maxims was this: son, work as long as you can and keep moving. The human body was created to move, and so it's important that you get plenty of exercise. I visited with a marvelous psychologist a few years ago, and he said it's very important in stressful times to make sure that you stay physically strong. So be sure to keep moving. It has a great effect on our attitude. Number 3, get away. Sometimes I go to the Brim Hollow. If you know me very well, you've heard of the Brim Hollow. It's where I spent some of my best childhood days with my grandfather Brim and my Granny Lena. I was there yesterday. No one bothers you in the Brim Hollow. I spent 2 hours in total seclusion, letting my mind drift and wonder and enjoy the beauty of nature. Sometimes I go to the Cracker Barrel by myself. I just like the Cracker Barrel, and sometimes I just want to be there alone. It's important that we spend some time getting away. I like to go to the Grand Canyon and ride mules. Don't get to go very often, but there's something about the wonder and the magnitude of that place. But sometimes we can just get away in our minds, take a mental vacation, and escape what's going on. And number 4, read something inspirational every day. Every day. Zig Ziglar used to say, when he talked about motivational tapes and inspirational books, people say, well, I read one every now and then. And old Zig would say, yeah, I guess you take a bath every now and then too. You know, feeding your mind regularly with inspirational material is so very important. Thanksgiving will be here in a couple of weeks. I want to remind you of the homework. You can go to our chamber website, get a copy of this, or you can, if you're creative, you can go on your own computer and make your own. Or take a legal pad. Take your time. Write down the things in life for which you're almost grateful. This time of year, I think of Karen Carpenter, her beautiful voice. I think of Christmas songs, and I think of country music. I think of all kinds of music. I think of country ham and homemade biscuits, crabapple jelly. So many things that we take for granted when we're not looking. I think of a sky full of stars on a clear night. I think of cool breezes and warm, comfortable beds and plenty. You know, most of us have plenty. Zig Ziglar said when he was a boy, they had plenty. He knew they had plenty because when he asked for seconds at the supper table, his mother would say, "No, you've had plenty." But it's true, you know. We have so many things to be grateful for. And if we don't take the time and look and ponder, the holiday season will come and be gone, and we'll be looking at 2021 and thinking about the challenges. So make sure you take the time to enjoy your blessings and enumerate them. And now I'll leave you with an Irish prayer. It goes like this: may the sun shine warm upon your face, and the wind be always at your back. May the road rise up to greet you. And until we meet again, if you know that Irish poem, you also know there's another line which says, "And when you die, may you get to heaven 30 minutes before the devil knows you're dead." May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you, be gracious unto you, and give you the peace that only Thanksgiving and the story of Christmas bring. I wish you well. Okay. Is that more than 30 minutes?
No.
Well, if you need to edit some of it out,